Chinese spy, a birthday invitation at Royal Lodge, the Duke's home near these gates on the Windsor estate. And
sometimes it's the little things that remind us of family. The way Chachi makes chai. Nani's secret naan recipe.
And according to the Times, an event at Windsor Castle. A relationship with Prince Andrew could open doors for a man accused of being a Chinese spy. A birthday invitation at Royal Lodge, the Duke's home near these gates on the Windsor estate. And according to the Times, an event at Windsor Castle itself. A function at St James's Palace. And twice access to Buckingham Palace, the heart of the royal establishment. Prince Andrew was a trade envoy appearing alongside President Xi and declaring himself a friend of China. But it's his relationship with a Chinese businessman who can't be named for legal reasons and now banned from the UK on national security grounds, which is causing alarm.
This is what China does, and it's very good at it indeed. Grey zone warfare, all part of a bigger geopolitical game of power, if you like, with the West, including Britain. It seeks opportunities, it seeks vulnerabilities in our society to gain privileged access at the very, very highest levels, including the royal family.
Court documents refer to the alleged spy as H6. He's aged 50 and until the COVID pandemic spent 1 or 2 weeks a month in the UK. Security services believed he had links with the United Front Work Department, an arm of the Chinese state. And the documents say his relationship with the Duke of York had a covert and clandestine element. Although Prince Andrew wouldn't have access to state secrets, his past role as a prominent royal and trade envoy meant he would have been well connected to politicians, diplomats, business executives and military figures.
Our security and intelligence agencies are continually vigilant for any threat to UK national security, whether that be around foreign influence, whether it be around espionage, whether it be around any security threat. And so, of course, we won't hesitate to take action.
The national security risk posed by H6 wasn't known at the time that he was invited to functions at the royal residences. Prince Andrew's office said that he ceased all contact with the businessman as soon as he received government advice. But questions are now being asked about the prince's business dealings, particularly now he has no royal allowance to pay for his home on the Windsor estate. And this biographer told Sky News he's not getting any answers.
This stuff has vanished. The Foreign Office claim not to know anything about it. The Department of Business and Trade know nothing. I've put in, I think, probably over 100 requests now, and I'm still really not much further forward in terms of, I asked for specific trips that he made.
No answer.
Copycat.
No answer.
Wow, so good, so special.
I'm going to be joined now by one of my favourite people, James Price, former Chief of Staff and Senior Special Advisor to the Chancellor of the Exchequer. Mr. Price, how are you this morning?
I hadn't realised that it was Friday the 13th until you said so. I'm now going to be paranoid all day long, but other than that...
It doesn't surprise me at all, this story. The Chinese spy, the man who... I mean, when you start reading the details of all of this, you know, the fact that this guy had some sort of letter from Prince Andrew's Chief of Staff saying, oh, you're very special, you're in a very privileged position, oh, we know how to get other advisors who don't do as we like out of the way, but you represent the prince in all that he cares to do. And you just think he's dictated that himself, hasn't he? It's an embarrassment. But not only is it embarrassment, surely it is a huge security risk.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, we can take some small comfort in the fact that it is unlikely that this person is the worst person with whom Prince Andrew has socialised or spent some time, if certain news stories across the pond are to be in any way countenanced. Prince Andrew does not have a great track record of fine judgment on these things, unfortunately. maybe that's why the Lord in his infinite wisdom did not make him the eldest son of her late Majesty. But I think the broader, wider point here is the fact that we have an increasingly dangerous world, and Britain has, because of the freedoms that we're supposed to enjoy, not quite sure how much we're actually getting to enjoy them at the moment, but because of our society and culture of freedoms, we are hated by people around the world. We are mistrusted and loathed by, for example, in this case, the Chinese Communist Party. China is probably the biggest threat that the West has or will maybe even ever face on this planet. And we don't seem to be alive to the huge danger that it poses. Look at the amount of money that they spend in universities and in other areas trying to weed their way in. Look at the fact that in most of these phones that people have got, you can download something like TikTok, which is a Chinese app. It's basically crack cocaine for people. It's very, very addictive. I think it's turning people's brains to mush, and that's before you realise the fact that when you spend a significant amount of time on it, all the studies show that you end up with a more positive view overall of China and the Chinese Communist Party. So it's basically a super spy weapon in our pockets, let alone the fact that there's a super spy hanging out with one of our dukes or princes.
Yeah, and someone who definitely probably has a bit of compromise knocking about, one would assume.
You may think.
But, I mean, you know, what I would say is this, let's play a bit of devil's advocate, is I'm sure that we all do this to some degree, you know, as part of statecraft. We have people who lobby on behalf of our own national interests. We have people whose job it is to go out and make diplomatic connections and build networks. So if there's a particular person who is sort of, you know, helping Prince Andrew handle his business, I mean, surely that should be allowed.
It's a valiant effort, Alex, to play devil's advocate here. I think you did. I think not. I think that again, the reason, the way that the Chinese Communist Party is so particularly insidious is that the state in China controls all of these business elements, as well as it being, you know, they've got all the spy agencies, they've got obviously the People's Liberation Army, one of the biggest and scariest armies in the world. The fact is that they're very happy to use that kind of state muscle and all the apparatus around it to also inveigle their way into business life, into the corporate world. You know, America in particular these days will come up with all kinds of fabulous new inventions and new technologies and things. Europe is being left far behind on that, and we need to catch up, a whole other story. The Chinese will come along and nick all of it. That kind of corporate espionage is very, very popular. I talked just about the kind of the tech scene in terms of our pockets. Broadly in our kind of cultural sector as well, how many people are being paid and funded to say nice China cuddly things across a whole range of areas, and now it seems they're trying to infiltrate the royal family as well. We need to be alive to this threat. This is not something that's going to go away. And I think that Prince Andrew isn't alone in thinking that maybe he's smart enough to handle these sorts of things, or that he's able to get around it. You've seen some footage there of Keir Starmer trying to cuddle up to China as we hand away territory to their allies. But also you've got lots of businessmen who do a lot of business in China, lots of money to be made there, very happy to turn a blind eye to the concentration camps of Uyghur Muslims out in the west of China, very happy to ignore the horrendous kind of civil liberties abuses there in order to make a quick buck. The time is coming when those supply chains will end as tensions ramp up, and a lot of people will be made very rich, but hopefully feel very ashamed of themselves for engaging with an evil totalitarian regime.
I mean, the first sort of order of business for this Labour government was to...
Honestly.
Information. Whenever you connect to the...
One minute they're telling you they're the enemy, and then they're in bed with them.
It might take a 10. How do you solve a problem? Like Prince Andrew.
Oh.
Oh dear, the problematic prince strikes again. It has emerged that someone described as a close confidant of the Duke of York, Prince Andrew, has been banned from entering the United Kingdom on national security grounds, amid concerns that he may have been acting as a spy for the Chinese Communist Party. Officials warned the then Home Secretary last year that the man known only as H6, John le Carré, eat your heart out, had been in a position to generate relationships between prominent UK figures and senior Chinese officials that could, and I quote, be leveraged for political interference purposes. Now, H6, shall we call him Ian? Ian was invited to the Duke's birthday party in 2020 and was told by Andrew's aide, Dominic Hampshire, that he could help in potential dealings with Chinese investors. A judge ruled that the Chinese businessman, Ian, had an unusual degree of trust from Prince Andrew. Now, we cannot verify that that is the case, and the Duke is not here to defend himself. But we do know that Andrew invited this alleged spy to Buckingham Palace, with the entrepreneur allegedly attending events not only at the King's official residence, but at St James's Palace and Windsor Castle to book. Now, the Duke's office said the following. The Duke of York followed advice from Her Majesty's government and ceased all contact with the individual after concerns were raised. The Duke met the individual through official channels with nothing of a sensitive nature ever being discussed. He is unable to comment further on matters relating to national security. But the problem is that whilst the Duke of York is known for his rather colourful private life, earning him the nickname Randy Andy, it may be his finances rather than his libido which is of the greatest concern. After all, the Telegraph newspaper report that the royal family have taken steps over the summer to distance themselves from the Duke, with the King said to have axed his £1 million annual living allowance and his security detail. It's not known, therefore, how the Duke is paying for his upkeep at the posh Royal Lodge on the Windsor estate. Now, the journalist Andrew Lowney has spent the last 4 years working on a new book about the Duke and has spoken of his concerns about the lack of transparency around Andrew's finances. What's going on? Now, this author, has said that government departments are doing anything to avoid sharing information about the Duke's business dealings, which is a problem given Andrew's friendship with an alleged Chinese spy, with Ian. Clearly, the Chinese would relish the influence of the late Queen Elizabeth's son and King Charles's brother, but what might he get in return? Now, Andrew could be as innocent as the driven snow, and there is no suggestion that he knew of Ian's alleged links to Beijing, or that there was any financial relationship between them. He would no doubt deny any impropriety whatsoever. But the rap sheet against this, in my view, foolish and arrogant man grows longer by the day. There was his friendship with known paedophile Jeffrey Epstein, and that car crash Newsnight interview in which he claimed to have a disorder in which he doesn't sweat. Well, he is sweating now as questions emerge about his friendship circle. That's not a euphemism, by the way. This is a man who settled out of court to the tune of millions against his accuser, Virginia Giuffre, who said that she was forced to have relations with him when she was just 17 years old, which, let me be clear, the prince strongly denies. Fair enough. But either way, like his nephew Harry, Andrew is a bad headline machine and a total liability. To make matters worse, Andrew is reportedly considering writing a book. Well, frankly, that's good news, as I'm a bit low on loo roll at the moment, and I could do with a doorstep. To be fair, it might shift a few copies in the children's section of Waterstones.
Oh no! Oh no!
Bring together all the baddest mothers around. Well, something's bound to go down. This Ali fight, I'm thinking Black Vegas. Y'all going home in a box.
Oh yeah, what'd you do?
I'm a thief.
I'm a thief. Honestly.
Please tell the court about the events of the night of the 22nd of December 1994. You mean the night he killed me?
May you never die until I kill you.
You don't die until I kill you. What kind of show is that?
Let's start this extraordinary story. I mean, they kind of seem to find Prince Andrew these stories. This is a story that the Duke of York appointed an alleged Chinese spy as his business advisor and promised him links to the heart of the royal family. in an apparent serious breach of national security. Now, it must be very clear here that there is no suggestion at all that Prince Andrew knew he was a spy or was involved in any spying duties. But it doesn't look great. I mean, in a sense, it's probably quite normal that you would probably, you would welcome in people who've got a bit of money or a bit of influence. That's what you would do if you're a member of the royal family.
A business advisor, didn't he?
But it does question his own sort of judgment and perhaps his own level of security.
And also the people around him who are meant to be advising him. I mean, he was a trade envoy, so he probably met loads of people all over the place. And I think it's fair to say that under David Cameron and George Osborne, there was a bit of a charm offensive going on with China at the time. That's sort of flipped around now. But, I mean, look, he's going to meet people. Maybe he should have asked questions, but I sort of hope that there's other people that are more informed who'd be checking out who the prince is meeting, what sort of correspondence they're entering into and all of that. So, yeah, I mean, Prince Andrew, he's like a sort of human flypaper for things being attracted to him that is not great look for him.
Not great.
There's this big new spy drama, Black Doves, on the telly at the moment.
I watched it.
I watched the first episode last night. That's our box set for Christmas. And then so there's lots of articles about spies under deep cover. And you remember there were these kind of Russian families that were under deep cover in America. Some of them were exposed, and one of them, I was reading the paper today, might have ended up marrying a senator. So it does seem, I think Caroline's right, that when you've got, it's fairly obvious who spies are going to target, senior members of the royal family or senior politicians. And therefore, if a member of the royal family is forging business links, which they're entitled to do if they're kind of a minor royal, but with somebody from a country which has a tradition, perhaps, of spying on countries like ours, then you would expect the security services to do the work. Not necessarily Prince Andrew's private secretary. You may not have the skill set. You'd want MI6 to know.
Well, I wonder if this would be maybe the Duke of York's defence in a sense, because this seems to have emerged February last year, doesn't it? There's this, I think we only know him as H6 now, which already feels quite Tinker Tailor.
It sounds like a mini-series in the making, doesn't it?
Doesn't it just? Yeah, I know. Black Pigeon or something maybe coming to our screen soon. But, in February, he was taken off a plane and then subsequently banned from the country. He then appealed against this, which seems strange, really. And all of this detail, including the letters with the Duke of York, came out of the appeal case and was revealed yesterday in court. Now, you have to think to yourself, why would he appeal? Because it looked like there was no chance of winning? Or is this some double plot that actually very successfully, by appealing, he's dragged the royal family into something that was which we didn't know about before then?
And because we're saying now, where was MI6, where are MI5 policies? It's a sort of bit of a power play to show how weak some of our defences are in relation to this. I think it's quite. It sounds like a mini-series in the making.
And we've got a comment from Buckingham Palace, which I think, when you first read it, go fair enough, but you think about it, go, it's extraordinary, really. Buckingham Palace have just simply said they do not act for the Duke of York, who is a non-working member of the royal family, and they decline to comment. Yeah, well, you may not act, but he's still a member of the royal family. And actually, as you sort of suggested there, his argument now could be, this is what happens when you take away the protection around me. I become vulnerable, and I've got to make a living. I've got to make a living.
I've got to engage
people will
with all
still get in
sorts of
touch
people.
with me, and actually, some of the documents suggest that the spy was told, he is quite desperate at the moment, so you might have a good chance.
I'm still.
Honestly.
Story on the front page of many of the papers today, and it's continuing to evolve over the course of the day, is this bloke H6. That's all we know about his name. There is an injunction on his name, and even if I knew his name, which I don't, I couldn't tell you for legal reasons. But H6 is a Chinese businessman who got very, very close to Prince Andrew. In fact, was invited to his birthday party, and really... now the question is, should that have happened? He's been banned from the UK. That's clearly a big security screw-up. Let's talk to Will Geddes, who's a security expert. Will, how did this happen, do you think?
Well, I mean, certainly in terms of why we're getting to know about this now, Peter, is fundamentally down to the fact that his appeal for returning into the UK has been rejected on the grounds of national security, which I think tells you quite a bit, in addition to the fact that we've now also established that MI5 rinsed his phone or cloned and downloaded the contents of his phone when he was in the UK back in 2021. Now, this whole situation's been going on for some time, and H6, as you say, who hasn't been specifically named, has had ties to the UK since about 2002. So he is very much following what I would term as a standard tradecraft for a hostile state actor, trying to ingratiate his way into the higher echelons of society, politics, and the like, and particularly in this instance, Prince Andrew, obviously a member of the royal family, to use that as a strategic stepping stone to then move into other areas. But there are some big questions right now, Peter, about how, in the knowledge of this individual's activities, and how much did Prince Andrew profiteer by his relationship with not only this individual but other individuals in China, because he's been an envoy to China for trade for quite some time.
And actually, even if you, as you say, has been an envoy, and of course his fall from grace happened about 5 years ago, we know that if there is a Chinese figure trying to get close to someone in public life, whether it is an MP, as we've seen previously, trying to work for their office or whatever, I'm not saying by any stretch of the imagination that we should be completely suspicious of all Chinese people, but if there is a Chinese national who is attempting to get close to a senior figure in the establishment of this country, no matter who it was, surely eyebrows should be raised. I mean, presumably some checks would be brought in for people who are working with royals, even if it is a non-working royal, such as Prince Andrew.
Well, you would have thought, Peter, but there has been a rather interesting leak of a letter, or certainly communications, from one of Prince Andrew's senior advisors, who talks about basically circumventing some of the protocols and some of the restrictions and barriers that would normally, one would hope, be in place to ensure that this individual would have been vetted before he was brought into contact with Prince Andrew. But Prince Andrew invited this individual to his 60th birthday party, in addition to the Chinese ambassador. There's also a big question mark over his former wife, Sarah Ferguson.
Let's get to that in just a second, Will, right. But I just want to read out a little bit of this letter that you mentioned there. The phone contained a letter from Dominic Hampshire, who was a senior advisor to Prince Andrew, dated March 2021, referring to the alleged spy having been invited to the Duke's birthday party that month. It stated, "I also hope that it is clear to you where you sit with my principal and indeed his family. You should never underestimate the strength of that relationship. Outside of his closest internal confidence, you sit at the very top of a tree that many, many people would like to be on." The letter added that following a meeting with Andrew, they had wisely navigated our way around the former private secretaries, and we have found a way to carefully remove those people who we don't completely trust. Under your guidance, we found a way to get the relevant people unnoticed in and out of the House of Windsor. I mean, this doesn't exactly scream, brilliant espionage, or maybe it is brilliant espionage. It sort of screams completely incompetent people around Prince Andrew, although I'm sure Dominic Hampshire would deny that.
I might be a little bit more cynical than you, Peter.
No.
And, place it beyond it being just incompetence. The one thing that we know with China is China has presented for a number of decades now major threats, not only to the UK, but to the United States and other European countries, by trying to ingratiate, as I mentioned, themselves into society or into the lives of people in the public eye. Now, the purposes of doing that is, like I could say, the great Peter Cardwell. I'm a good friend of him. That gives me a great degree of credibility if I want to speak to some of your colleagues, some of your peers, some of your associates. Now, obviously, going into somewhere and saying, I'm a close friend of Prince Andrew, and let's not forget, something also that has come to light is that Prince Andrew authorised H6, this particular individual, to speak on his behalf with a number of Chinese businesses back in China, but also the Eurasia Fund, which is a conglomeration of funds that monies are then invested into China, and China invests back into the United Kingdom. Now, where I see this right now is the fact that what we do know with the tradecraft used by China, but also used by Russia and other hostile states, is to gather sufficient intelligence. And a lot of this could be very personal information that those individuals might not want disclosed to the public. And that can be used as leverage, or in simpler terms, blackmail, to then get to other stepping points or introductions. And it is about introductions, and it is about gaining trust. And what we can say in some defense of Prince Andrew is that this whole situation came about, and I don't think coincidence, I think it was very much manipulated, that it came around the same time as he just
every footballer's journey starts in their backyard.
just come off the back of that absolute crisis of an interview that he did with Newsnight, and around the same time as the beginnings of the legal case by Virginia Giuffre that she was taking up in the United States against him. So he was extremely vulnerable, he was extremely isolated, and he was probably throwing his hands out in different directions. Now, bear in mind also that his brother, when he became king, also told him to move out of his existing accommodations and move into Frogmore Cottage, which Andrew wanted to resist. And his brother said, well, I'm not going to pay or subsidise you living in your existing residence. So Andrew and his wife, which we can come to if you want.
Yeah, of course, go ahead. Now's the time. Go ahead, Will.
Well, Sarah Ferguson has also been connected to another Chinese business where they paid her something like £300,000 plus a £76,000 a year retainer for her to represent this particular business in China. So what hasn't been brought to light, and I think needs to be brought to light, is basically Prince Andrew's finances. How much has he been profiteering? How much money has he been paid? And how much, by proxy, is he at compromise?
Well, that's a big point, and also the fact that he is a non-working royal. You might ask the question, what's the point, what's in it really for the Chinese? He's not going to be privy to too many state secrets as perhaps he would have been to some degree previously when he was a working royal. I can sense, I know, of course, we can see the desperation, the money, the people he's associating himself with, the fact that he is so incredibly isolated. But I suppose, again, to be cynical, what is in it for the Chinese here, Will?
Well, what's in it for them is the connections. Now, he isn't, as you rightly say, Peter, a working royal, but there will be a number of individuals that the use of his name will open particular doors for them. I don't think he was the end target by any stretch of the imagination, because for all the reasons you've just mentioned, Peter, he won't be party to any state secrets, he won't be party to any political decisions, but Prince Andrew will have connections in those circles that, by proxy of using Prince Andrew to open up those doors, could give the Chinese opportunities to socially engineer information for their own benefit. Now, we know with the Chinese, allegedly, I say that, they're infamous for stealing state secrets. Yeah. They're infamous for
they're not our friend.
Intellectual property rights. Whereas the Russians use a lot of force and they use a lot of cyber, the Chinese use economic means and social engineering and influencing politics in various different ways. Although Russia does a little bit of that as well.
Yeah, and academia as well. I'm really concerned about some of the Chinese links into some of our biggest and best universities as well. I mean, the royal family is keeping pretty tight-lipped about this, and actually there have been a number of royal journalists who've been trying to get something out of Andrew's people in regard to this, but it's sort of quite hard to contact them because he's sort of off the radar in that regard as well. I mean, what would you imagine the reaction in royal circles and royal security circles will be to this? Will it sort of be casting eyes to the ceiling going, here we go again, another dodgy link of Prince Andrew, that he is, that he is consorting with people who do not have his best interests at heart because he is so vulnerable, and presumably this will make him, I mean, not that I'm asking you to be a psychologist, but this will presumably make him retreat even further and be even more paranoid about the people around him.
I think if he wasn't isolated already, Peter, he's going to be even more isolated, compartmentalised, and told literally to stay off the grid. Now, the problem is as you rightly say, he's not a working royal. So in terms of what he has to live on, that's the big question. Where is he going to get his remuneration from? However, he is, I think rolling of the eyes is probably, people may be getting a migraine in the royal family right now for what his actions are, and what is yet again a very poor judgment of character of individuals that he seems to associate himself with. Ghislaine Maxwell was one, age 6 is another.
Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah, Jeffrey Epstein. Yeah, I mean, the list goes on and on and on. He's not the best judge of character, is he?
Apparently not. Will, you're a very good judge of character, so thank you very much for joining.